All right, hello, Susan. So we're recording this video because I think it's going to make us a little bit more efficient with time, but also just a different way of presenting that's unique and special to the times that we live in. Many of the conferences these days are asking our elite people to record their keynote and then show up for the Q&A, and we're kind of doing that here. Just a new way to jazz things up and show people how things can be done. So maybe can you introduce yourself and your current role to everyone?
Sure. So I'm Susan Denburg. I'm Executive Vice Dean and Associate Vice President Academic in the Faculty of Health Sciences, which is probably analogous to the Provost of the faculty. Not a lot of direct line responsibility, but a lot of responsibility to engage with others and promote new initiatives, support and enable people to do their jobs, connect across campus, where I'm often acting as the Dean across campus. And Paul and I are on the same page about all the issues that we need to address.
Got it. And so you're telepathically connected with Dr. Wilburn. I get it. And that's awesome. And it sounds like a big part of your job is really to think about that overall system of how we connect all the dots in the way that you're telling it, right? It's about connecting dots external and maybe internally as well. Can you talk to me a little bit about the role of leaders in doing that, especially on the academic side of the house?
Well, one of the things that leaders do need to understand is exactly how systems work and who are the players, who might be the players, and be creative about that as well. Always looking laterally to see who might be engaged in a new initiative and bring information and intelligence forward to others to make sure they're up to date about what is happening in a related sphere. And so that kind of constant connection, an appreciation of how decisions are made and how to navigate a system, I think is one of the key roles for senior leaders.
And I think that what you just said, though, I think it probably resonates with all leaders at all levels, because I think that, sure, you definitely have to do it, like it's a minimum competency at the senior leadership level. But I think that if you're a more junior leader or starting off in your career as someone who is just running a lab or a little program, is still understanding how that program fits within the big greater web of everything else is really important, because I don't think that it's a one size fits all kind of solution, because if you only wait till you get to a certain level before you understand the whole system, sometimes you're missing out on opportunities like far before that.
I think you're absolutely correct, Teresa. I think, in fact, that one key role for a mentor is, in fact, working with junior folk who have aspirations to lead and make a difference, make a change, and constantly be prodding them as to what their network is, what's going on, who might they think about to engage. So absolutely.
Yeah, I think we always think about systems as if they were separate from the people that inhabit the systems. But I think what I'm hearing from you is a really important pearl and nugget is that systems are made of people, at least the systems that we run in, right? Maybe computer systems are going to be computers, but when we're talking about the system in the healthcare system, in the academic system, or in, with the Bridging Leaders program, a combination of both, the system that we talk about is actually just made of all of us, is it not?
Yes, it is made of us. And that's why it's so very critical to massage all components of the system at all times.
Yeah.
Make sure that there's no component of the system that feels left out or that is left out. But it becomes a little bit tricky in terms of when you use the term navigating the system. It's not navigating a bunch of robots. It's actually dealing with people, their needs, their particularities, how they function, how they need, and that's how they need to achieve success for themselves and their initiatives. And for that reason, it's very time consuming. So nothing can happen terribly quickly. And on that, I'll comment about the pandemically induced virtual meetings that we're having, which are profoundly two-dimensional and transactional. And I think we're lulled into a sense of complacency that we're getting a lot done. But in point of fact, what we're not doing is massaging the system. And we're not creating new ways of engaging with each other, which is the only way we achieve kind of creative solutions together. So while we're getting a lot of business done, we're not getting a lot of human engagement and new business that relies on creative interaction.
Well, that's really interesting because to me, I think that's the difference between like a Zoom bingo meeting, right? Where there's like 100 people or multiple pages. That's one kind of meeting. And then there's the meeting that we're having kind of like now to record this, right? It's a one-on-one. To me, this is much more like what you're talking about, that figuring people out. But it means my calendar has exploded with lots of one-on-ones that I might have done in the hallway after another meeting. And you're right, it's like more intentional that you need to be strategic about it and to think about the people in that system and what they need.
Correct. You're exactly right. But I would still posit, Teresa, that this works because I know you and I trust you. And while you can interview a million different sorts of people, and maybe there are some that are more comfortable in this kind of environment that I might be, although I'm increasingly. What I do find, even sometimes in small meetings, or larger ones, 15 people, if you know most of the folks and you're relying on that trust from past experiences, it can work much better. There also has to be the willingness to expose yourself a little bit, make a joke, share something. I find now you're going to meetings which would never happen around a big table, where everyone is waiting for the meeting to start and they don't want to look in each other's eyes in a sense because they don't want to engage really. They're just waiting for the meeting to start. And that's unfortunate. And I think for us, mostly we meet with people that we know. But for young folks who are starting out, to try to create new relationships this way, if we don't really go out of our way to reach out to them, it's going to be very difficult. It's lost time, and it can set a relationship off in a little bit of the wrong direction.
Yeah, that totally resonates with me. We've been kind of merging the CPD office and emerging it as a new unit while during the pandemic. Like we started the initiative maybe 3 months before. We hired our manager 3 days before. She started 3 days before the pandemic was called. And I have never met Danielle more than once in real life. And so I feel what you're talking about, because I think it's been really difficult to navigate the system, right? In that situation, it's a mini system, but it's like, got a half a dozen people on one side, half a dozen people on the other. There's been turnover of staff, and now we've got new staff that have never met each other before. And creating that trust, creating that network, it takes that care. And so last time we talked about like leading a team and creating that kind of teaming environment, but I think what we're getting at here is that maybe the system is just a team of teams, right? Like it's a network of intercalated people who are teaming at different levels in different ways. And I think that when you appreciate the system in that way, all of a sudden it makes sense. You think about the hospital as its own team of teams, the university as a team of teams, but then within those teams, people are all networked in weird ways together. And I think that's what makes it so complex to be in an academic center that does health sciences work, because in an academic center across campus in the history department, there is not like the analogous structure of the teaching history application, zone where they're dependent and codependent on them. Whereas we are inextricably tied: nursing, rehab sciences, medicine, like the midwifery, NP program, PA program. Like without our clinical partners, we're kind of lost, right?
Absolutely. And for many, and particularly physicians, the folks that are the academics are themselves the staff at the hospital, which isn't the same in the School of Nursing and Rehab. So there's an interplay with the clinicians for clinical supervision and learning, but there's not the same. We are the same people. We do our day job in the hospital, and we also have to be academics. And for that reason, that was in the context of thinking about system transformation. And I've been involved in a lot of system transformation, both in terms of healthcare delivery and learning. For example, the distributed medical education, even before that, rural medical education that people like Carl Stobie championed. At round about the same time, the system transformation that resulted in the development of a clinician educator stream, which was very novel and quite revolutionary, actually, when we did it at McMaster. And the realization there was that academic medicine was sitting on the backs of these clinician educators, but they just weren't called that, who really had very little opportunity to advance in the system. And through that, we did a lot of work with a lot of people and formalized the clinician educator stream, which at the university was a whoa, because essentially they knew how to evaluate researchers and educators, educational researchers, whatever, but not clinicians. And there, the evaluation consisted of, I'd send my grandmother to them. They're that good. I mean, that was not any longer satisfactory. So we created the clinician educator stream with a category that was brand new concept of clinical scholarship. So then in addition to educational excellence, we could develop clinical scholarship that depended on the day jobs, the observations, and the expertise of folks in the hospitals. And for that, we also needed the hospital and the university to become a genuine academic health science center, which is, again, a systems transformation, which did it happen that way? Not precisely, but I think that increasingly, with the awareness that clinicians have the opportunity to advance their careers through their hospital-based work, their clinical work, there is the opportunity to grow this partnership and actually seriously transform the system.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think that we're starting to see some glimmers of that with some of the quality improvement. They're doing the first symposium. We've got EDI initiatives that are trying to bring equity into healthcare. So I think that the system that you lay forth, right? You're like the Zamboni driver, and all of us are the figure skaters or hockey players, depending on who you prefer to be. And you've smoothed the ice so that we can now skate. And I think that that's, to me, what systems change is about, is to figure out what it is that the team, that everyone else needs to be able to shine, and creating those structures within the system and convincing the people to let you change the structure of that was really core to creating equity.
Would that it be so, Teresa? I love the image of the Zamboni, but and I love the way the ice looks after it's passed through, and I'd love to drive one. But actually, as soon as the players get back on the ice, it's messed up all over again. And the mess up's good. But it's not that we could have done a better job, but I think it needs to be a constantly evolving concept. So clinical scholarship, for example, what does it actually mean? What are the serious criteria? Is it a serious category of scholarship? We think it is. We depended in the past on Boyer's definition of multiple types of scholarship, and I think this has come to the fore. But folks need support. They need support. They need time. No matter how much they're thinking about QA in the hospital when they're a surgeon or an anesthetist, they still need the time to spend on collaborating with others and setting up research and evaluation. And it's that they need constant support in doing. And the hospital needs to appreciate, I suppose, and needs to see the benefit for themselves in promoting this type of clinical scholarship.
You got it. You need more than one Zamboni driver sometimes, right? Sometimes it's a big sheet of ice. And you're right. Anytime you put the players back in the game, they're going to break the system. They're going to mess it up again because everyone's got their own way of doing. And then you got to evolve the rules. So I think the ice metaphor to me is the most resonant for most leaders, because it is about like the fact that you have to go drive the Zamboni every so often, because you can't just keep letting people cut up the ice. It's such a Canadian metaphor too. That's the other part that I love about it. Yeah.
The other issue that's a real conundrum is what we're talking about also depended not on an unchanging system, but on a relatively predictable system. And our system is upside down now. It's completely upside down and on its head. And so everything that clinician educators, for example, or any of our teachers took for granted can't any longer be taken for granted. They'd all been immersed in virtual learning and virtual healthcare. And the system, our learning system, our research system, our clinical scholarship has to catch up in a sense. How do people translate their academic obligations and academic skill sets into the complex issues of COVID-related care, virtual care, the transformation of the health system in Ontario health teams now? How do we do it? How do we help them do it? And how do they lead the way and help us understand what a new class of research can be, how they can help evaluate, how they can bring best evidence to decision-making at the tables that are making those decisions.
100%. Well, thank you so much for this fascinating conversation. And I look forward to chatting with you more about other issues.
Thank you very much, Teresa.